Acts 9, verses 36 through 43 from the Message. Down the road away in Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha, Gazelle in our language. She was well known for doing good and helping out. During the time Peter was in the area, she became sick and died. Her friends prepared her body for burial and put her in a cool room. Some of the disciples had heard that Peter was visiting in nearby Lydda and sent 2 men to ask if he would be so kind as to come over. Peter got right up and went with them. They took him to the room where Tabitha's body was laid out. Her old friends, most of them widows, were in the room mourning. They showed Peter pieces of the clothing Gazelle had made while she was with them. Peter put the widows all out of the room. He knelt and prayed. Then he spoke directly to the body. "Tabitha, get up." She opened her eyes. When she saw Peter, she sat up. He took her hand and helped her up. Then he called in the believers and widows and presented her to them alive. When this became known all over Joppa, many put their trust in the Master. Peter stayed on a long time in Joppa as a guest of Simon the tanner.
It's kind of surreal to go from sing rejoicing to the first line of my sermon, which is another school shooting this week. Another, and you just let that word sink in. And school. A school with children in kindergarten and first grade and second grade. And since there have been so many times we could say another school shooting, we do have lessons that have been learned along the way. And among the lessons learned is that law enforcement should immediately rush in and not wait as they did at Columbine. And another is the media should spend more time honoring the dead than repeatedly saying the name and showing a picture of the alleged killers. And that's been easier to do this time because Kendrick Castillo was, in every conceivable way that one could possibly describe, an exceptional human being. Kendrick Castillo is the definition of a hero. Selfless, sacrificial, honorable. The contributions he would have made to the world are staggering. Now, one death shouldn't matter more than another, but sometimes it feels that way. Not as in suggesting it should have been someone else, but rather, why someone like him? And it occurred to me that's a little like the question we could ask about Tabitha, also known as Dorcas. Why someone like her? There was something about her. She was compassionate, but she was exceptionally compassionate. She was charitable. Other widows depended on her, which is why people rushed to find Peter when Tabitha died, and it's why Peter rushed to her bedside. And as Jeremy noted, notably, she was also a disciple. Named as a disciple, not as a woman who followed Jesus. She was a disciple, like, Peter and James and Thomas and the rest. Tabitha, the exceptionally compassionate disciple. Kendrick and Tabitha were both really good people. Why was one of them brought back from the dead and not the other? Whether it's healing from blindness and hemorrhages or the resurrection of the dead to 5,000 people being fed, that's kind of a basic fundamental question in miracle stories. I mean, why some and not others? It's a fundamental question to the concept known as theodicy, which is a question of suffering and divine justice. If God is good, then why is there evil? Rabbi Kushner famously asked, why do good things happen to bad people? Or more to the point today, why do bad things happen to good people? In the same way, what about the other students who rushed to subdue the shooter? God forbid, but why didn't they die? And thank God they didn't. They are going to suffer from survivor's guilt for the rest of their lives. Therefore, they will forever ask, why him and not me? And their survival could no doubt be described as a miracle. I mean, it's a miracle it wasn't me or a member of my family, because that's how I would describe it for myself, with the inevitable struggle. But why not me? That may be something you've had to ask over the course of your life. So it's honorable to honor the heroes. It also happens, in this case, to be a handy deflection. Lesson learned, it's a new strategy, since we know that now is not the time, was always just a means, it's never the time to talk about guns. And claiming it's all about mental health, well, that was revealed as a lie the minute legislators went apocalyptic over the idea that a judge could rule someone who is dangerous should not have a gun. And of course, we all know that offering someone our thoughts and prayers has been spoiled by its overuse by those who are trying to deflect from the fact that beyond thoughts, actions will save lives. And so I fear that honor the heroes will suffer the same fate. Kendrick Castillo was a hero. But that doesn't make it okay that he was also just the latest child sacrificed at the altar of people who demand the right to arm their own militia. And thank God there weren't more this time. This time. Every school child in America fears it could be them the next time, or then the time after that. They're reminded of that every time they do lockdown drills. Of course, lockdown drills are one of those added lessons from so many school shootings. That's also led kids like the 6th grader down in STEM who grabbed a bat and declared he would go down fighting. And Kendrick, to believe they needed to take things into their own hands, no matter the consequences. Kendrick was a child sacrifice. Now, we don't know the reason why Tabitha died, and clearly it wasn't from old age. It was sudden. It was unexpected. As widows cried, they held up clothing that she had made for them. These were real people who needed her to be alive. And then she was. Peter said, Tabitha, get up. Just as Jesus had said the same to the daughter of Jairus, daughter, get up. And she did. So Tabitha is, of course, a miracle story. And more than a few times people have asked me about miracle stories, do I really have to believe this? And among them, Tabitha's is one of the easiest to explain away. For example, she was just in a coma and came out of it at just the right time. Makes it logical. In a similar way, scholars have suggested, for example, that Jesus didn't walk on water, he walked on a sandbar that nobody could see. Other miracles in the Bible, however, are harder or even impossible to explain, and sometimes the explanations are more ridiculous than the miracle itself, and therefore even more difficult to believe. In fact, I don't believe in miracles, but believe is the key word there. So there are miracles. I just don't think it's my place to tell God what God can and cannot do. I don't think we're supposed to use our heads to believe in them. Rather, they, I think, are to inspire faith in our hearts. To have faith, not in miracles as such, but to have faith in God. Because ultimately, miracles don't make sense. Because that's not what miracles are. Miracles don't make sense. They disrupt what makes sense. But believe in them or not, we can recognize they have a purpose. And more often than not, they are a sign to point to something of greater significance. I am so grateful. There is more to this world than we can explain or understand. I am grateful that there are things capable of opening our eyes and minds and hearts to possibilities we were not aware of before. And you know, sometimes miracles are just seeing something that was already there. So one purpose of today's miracle story, among other things, was as a sign to the early church that disciples, not just Jesus, were also capable of working miracles. Or, more accurately, that God was capable of working miracles through disciples. Which means, to me, I think, that disciples can do something more than just offering thoughts and prayers. But what that something is today, after so many times we can say another school shooting, what is that something? I don't know. We can reason and talk and offer explanations until we're blue in the face. We vote, protest, picket, and even pray. But if one is okay with child sacrifice, then frankly, at this point, I fear only a miracle will change people's minds about whether we should choose guns or kids. But one possibility is to pray for a miracle. An article I read this week in the Harvard Business Review, you know, it's the other Bible. Well, it opened my eyes to something else, too. So in this article, a researcher in behavioral economics conducted a study. She gave participants difficult ethical dilemmas. And in one scenario, participants imagined they were the president of a nonprofit working to end child labor in Southeast Asia. They had to decide whether to accept a significant donation by a company that is known to violate child labor laws, or risk letting the nonprofit shut down completely. The researchers then divided the group and asked one, what should you do? And they asked the other group, what could you do? The could group came up with more creative solutions than the should group. And her conclusion, approaching problems with a should mindset gets us stuck on the trade-off choices and narrows our thinking to one answer. And it's the one that seems most obvious. But when we think in terms of could, we stay open-minded, and the trade-offs involved inspire us to more creative solutions. And you know, that kind of blew my mind. I mean, how simple is that? It's, you know, seeing something that's already there. And chances are you and I feel stuck about something in our lives, maybe right now. And personally, when I feel stuck, my next step tends toward depression. So what if, no matter what the issue might be, what if when I feel stuck, I ask what could I do instead of what should I do? And when I ask that question, I already feel freer. What was the miracle of the story in Tabitha? Was it that someone can be raised from the dead? Was it that the disciples are supernaturally capable? Or a sign that points to the fact that there is no point beyond which we should ever give up hope? And in the gun violence arena, maybe believing in miracles will at least make us more hopeful, and which is a start. but more concretely, in any arena of competing moral interests, I find the simple idea of setting aside what we should do and instead think and strategize and collaborate on what we could do quite liberating. To free us from feeling stuck and to free us from gridlock. And wouldn't that constitute a full-out miracle? When have you felt stuck in life? Or where do you feel stuck in your life right now? There's something out there we could do that we haven't simply seen yet. And the how begins in prayer. So in your bulletin, I have this insert, prayers in the aftermath of gun violence. And I invite us into a time of prayer. Giver of life and love, you created all people as one family and called us to live together in peace. Surround us with your love as we face again the tragedy of gun violence. For the children and adults who have been killed, the many wounded and hospitalized, the traumatized, grieving survivors, and those known to you alone, loving God.
Make us instruments of your peace.
God of righteousness, you have granted our elected and appointed leaders power and responsibility to protect us and to uphold our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Strengthen their devotion to our common life and give them clarity of such purpose. For all who bear responsibility, for all who struggle to discern what is right in the face of powerful political forces, loving God.
Make us instruments of your peace.
God of compassion, we give you thanks for first responders, police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and all those whose duties bring them to the streets, the schools, the malls, and the homes where the carnage of gun violence takes place every day. Give them courage and sound judgment in the heat of the moment and grant them compassion for the victims. For our brothers and sisters who risk their lives and serenity as they rush to our aid, loving God.
Make us instruments of your peace.
Merciful God, bind up the wounds of all who suffer from gun violence, those maimed and disfigured, those left alone and grieving, and those who struggle to get through one more day. Bless them with your presence and help them find hope. For all whose lives are forever changed and broken by the scourge of gun violence, loving God.
Make us instruments of your peace.
God who remembers, may we not forget those who have died, more than 30,000 in the past year, in the gun violence that we have allowed to become routine. Receive them into your heart and comfort us with your promise of eternal love and care. For all who have died, those who die today, and those who will die tomorrow, loving God.
Make us instruments of your peace.
God of tender mercy, be with those who are overwhelmed, enraged, frustrated, and demoralized by the plague of gun violence. Give them a sense of your presence and plant in them the seed of hope. For those whose hope for life in this world is shattered and broken, loving God.
Make us instruments of your peace.
God of justice, help us, your church, find our voice. Turn us from the worship of power. Give us courage to confront our false gods and to protest the needless deaths caused by gun violence. Help us rise above our dread that nothing can be done and grant us the conviction to advocate for change. For your dream of a world where children are safe and all of us live together without fear, loving God.
Make us